All right, everyone. Welcome to the second session on the brainstorming for this a legal framework for a drug regulation in India. So this is based on the conversation that we had a couple of weeks ago. We had a debate about should recreational drugs be legalized in India, and we had a very interesting conversation. And this session is all about brainstorming for it. So we came up with a idea to come up with like 4 brainstorming sessions in total, where we arrive at a certain comprehensive way of like looking at how do we regulate drugs in India in a very sensible way, because like there is a lot of like idiosyncratic inconsistencies that exist in current systems of classifying drugs, and not just classification but like drug regulation overall. So we are looking at how to solve this problem in a solution oriented discussion, because so far in the debate club we've had discussions that are more like just us coming together to have a meaningful exchange of various perspectives. We'll come and have disagreements and we'll explain that and all that stuff, but um this brainstorming session is more geared towards like a constructive outcome. So here we're not like trying to disagree with each other or anything. We can, but the intent is that you arrive at a certain constructive outcome out of those discussions and disagreements or whatever. So that is the motive behind the brainstorming sessions. And like I said, we've already had one session. This is the second week. We will have a couple of more sessions, and we'll try to wrap up all the brainstorming to come up with this like theoretical framework for how do we do this by the end of those 4 sessions. And I really hope that you guys are not too disturbed by the background noise. There is a temple near my house and they're playing some music for the festival stuff. So I hope it's not too much of a distraction. You guys are able to hear my voice and understand everything properly?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay, great. So let me share my screen. Let me share my screen and okay, hope you guys can see the screen.
Yes.
Okay, so let me do a quick recap of like what we did last time. Okay, so this is all stuff that we worked on. I mean, this is some of this was something that I already did after that call, and then we carried on the discussion from there. And we came up with like this is like AI generated stuff that we came up with, like impacts of the drugs on across various systems. And yeah, so we did this sample like brainstorming on caffeine and tobacco and things like this. So we listed out the problems with the drug regulation in India. So the impact of drugs on individuals' health, psychology, wellness, and economic sustainability, these are not measured right now. These are like, we just have like a very arbitrary system of like drug regulation, which does not look at these things. So let me just note that down. Impact of drugs on individual health are not examined in how we regulate drugs. So impact on society, impact of drugs on society as a whole, societal expense on rehabilitation of individuals who are victims of drug abuse. Existing drug distribution systems are also often used for illegal activities, law enforcement expense. So these are all some factors that we looked at. It's not exactly factors concerning drug regulation. And we are looking at what are the measurable aspects of it and how do we do the solutioning. So and for the solution, we talked about like how do we classify. First of all, we need to come up with a way to like sensibly classify these drugs on the basis of like various factors. So for example, permanence of drug effect is one of the factors that we will look at, like in how we classify these drugs, and severity of the drug effect, chronicity of side effects, rate of dependence, cost to society, and all these things. These are all like very, very nuanced factors that have a very, very real effect, because like different drugs have different impacts. If you look at the scientific classification of drugs, you have things like caffeine is also a drug, alcohol is a drug, and just like very specific things like like nicotine is a drug. It's not just those, like because in society, like when you hear drugs, right, they always think about these hard drugs. We think about things like cocaine or like methamphetamines or things like that. But even caffeine counts as a drug. So that in a scientific perspective, that is true. And so therefore, we need to have a classification system that actually measures the severity or the classification, like, or like the different grades of like how detrimental a drug is to society should be classified on the basis of various factors. And that's what we're looking at here. So various impacts on the individual consumer, the immediate friends and family, society at large. So for example, like if somebody is addicted to coffee, that is definitely detrimental to the person who's addicted, but it's not going to have an effect on their friends and family immediately. Maybe they will be concerned for their well-being, of course, but it's not like having like second-hand effects or something like that. But something like a cigarette is going to like cause harm to the person immediately around them as well.
So the effect is detrimental in coffee consumption. It takes a while to get some significant effect, and that too just an effect, not a detrimental effect.
Hey Manshu, your mic quality is so bad right now. It's like there's a lot of echo. Can you check what's wrong with that? And also the classification is the first step. I mean, we identified the problem as classification being the first step. And then once the classification, then we can have granular laws applied to different cases, different classes in terms of like how beneficial the effective enforcement of those laws will be to society. So I think that instead of like looking at it from a moralistic perspective, because that is also a thing, where people say that, this is morally incorrect or something. But we recognize, last time we talked about like the I guess the relationship that exists between personal freedom and societal impact. I feel like we should aspire for a society where we are prioritizing on personal freedom, as long as it does not, that the exercise of the personal freedom does not impact those of others around. So if you look at it from that perspective, right, like if you just classify the drugs as being on with the measurement of like how detrimentally society is impacted by one individual's use of those drugs, then we can have like put restrictions on individuals consuming those drugs so that like society's freedom is not impacted. So that is the reason why the classification really matters, because classification on things like this, permanence of drug effects, severity of effects, and rate of dependence, cost to society, scope of impact to others around the user. So all of these things. And then we came up with this kind of a classification system. I mean, this is something still a work in progress. I'm not going to say that this is something that we arrived at or concluded. We may deviate from this, but this is something that I initially came up with even before this call, even before the first brainstorming call. And I'll walk you through this, but okay, I'll just quickly walk you through this. So any kind of drug, we're measuring the impact of this drug on 4 dimensions. So we have the physical dimension, and we have emotional dimension, we have like psychological, we have spiritual. So these are 4 things that we are looking at in terms of like the domains of impact of that drug. And within each dimension, you have several other measurements that we're doing. So for physical, you're looking at scope of impact. I mean, each of these domains will contain each of these other metrics as well. So scope of impact concerns like, is it affecting a part of the individual's body, or is it affecting the individual overall? Or if it's affecting not just the individual, but also the people in the vicinity, or is it affecting others at large? So for example, if you do like some kind of injections, and if you're discarding these injections on the ground, or there is a large number of people who are doing these kind of things, and these needles could end up like infecting somebody else, maybe like child could get infected or something like that. That is it has a cost to society, right? Even cigarettes, like when you smoke, it's your lungs are getting affected, your body is getting affected, but also people around you are getting affected, but also the society at large is getting affected in terms of having to clean up the cigarette butts in the public areas and all this stuff. So that's the scope of impact column. And then we have the frequency of exposure. So depending on what is the frequency of exposure, what are the other things that matter? So then you basically trace the pathway, saying that for physical dimension, it affects only the individual, and the if the frequency of exposure is high, then it causes the period of exposure is also high. Then you can look at the valence of effects. Valence of effects means is it positive or is it neutral or is it negative? Because certain drugs can have a positive impact on certain physical things. For example, if you take marijuana, marijuana is used in the medical context a lot. So what they do is they have certain kinds of drugs which will be used for chronic pains or something like that. So from that perspective, every drug will have different pathways. What are the different pathways it takes and has an impact? And at the end of it, we can have a certain reading as okay, so cigarettes will take this pathway, and also from a psychological perspective, it also causes addiction. So it causes detrimental impact on the people using it. So this is a complex way of
measuring
the impact of a drug.
I think we made this clear in the last brainstorming session that the classification should be specific, because the medicinal marijuana is not the same as the usual naturally occurring marijuana.
Exactly.
Some would even argue that those are not even the same thing. So I think there should be a classification of naturally occurring and made up.
No. I'll tell you how I was planning to do that. So, when you over here, we have a cigarette as a product. This is the end product. It's not the constituent of cigarette. We're not doing this for nicotine. We're doing this for a product. So that means at the product level itself, you're having various degrees of products. So, for example, cigarette is one product, and then you can have CBD, CBD oil. This contains marijuana, but it contains the non-psychoactive components of what constitutes marijuana. And then we can have something like THC oil, which has a different effect. So each of these would be different drugs, and then each of those would have several pathways as to how they're impacting. So at the end of it, right, you will have a certain outcome which looks something like this. So the object, you have different columns for object. You have CBD oil, and then so this way what happens is that instead of us having a blanket ban on anything, for example, marijuana being illegal in India makes no sense when people are selling bhang on the streets, or CBD oil is legally, it is valid. You can actually get CBD oil online in India because it is not legally restricted. So for us to say that marijuana is not legal in the country is not actually not accurate. So they only have a ban on THC. CBD is something that is considered legally valid, to sell, and as long as you have a medical advice to consume that. So this, we can have various categories of things listed, and then for those you can have various classes attributed to that. So when I say this kind of for example, right, let's say cigarettes, right? Cigarettes will have this pathway. This pathway itself could have a classification attributed to it. Let's say that this is let's say RC1 or something like that. I'm just making up random numbers. So this uses RC1, and then DC2 and AC5, whatever, each pathway has a name, and then you will, at the end of it, you will get something like this, where if you take cigarette, then it will contain all of these things. And we can have certain other policies which will say that if a certain drug contains these pathways, then it goes into maybe one of 5 different things. So we can have at the end, we can have something like final classification. And I think last time, Sandeep, you were talking something about a NCAP type classification, right? Where you have at the top level, you have a very, very high level classification of safety standards for cars. So yes. It will be so 1 to 5 star, something like that. So this will be something like that, where you have class 1, class 2. So class 1 would be highly restricted or prohibited. For example, let's say that there is a certain drug, maybe it's not even consumable, but it's something that could lead to people making homemade bombs or something, right? So now if you go to the pathway here, what will happen is you look at the effect of this. Obviously, a bomb is a physically it causes physical harm. It's not like an emotionally affecting. It's a physical harm. It has secondary impacts on emotions of people as a side effect of the physical impact that is causing on so many people. Like let's say that 20 people are killed in a bomb attack, then obviously it's going to have multiple effects, but the physical effect is what we'll be measuring. And here the scope of impact would be the society at large immediately, and the frequency of exposure is low, but the period of exposure is also low, but the severity of the effects is fatal. So you will have like a pathway that connects these two, 1, 2, 3, 4. These anything that connects these 4 will automatically be classified as like class 1. So we can have like up to 5 classes, something like this. At a top level, you will just like say what class cigarettes are in. Maybe we'll say the class 3. Let's say that is the advertised thing. So we'll have different kinds of like drug regulation policies applied to each class. So that is why I made up this file into like different things. So class-based restrictions. So for each class, what are the restrictions that are in place? And if somebody is violating a certain restriction, so when I say restriction, like we can more accurately call it like class-based laws or regulations. So let's say that a certain class of drugs are only meant to be used in academic context or research context or something like that. So you need to have a license to be able to use this drug. Then a violation of that, like let's say that somebody is using that drug without the appropriate license, then what is a violation for that? So these are a couple of things that we still need to figure out, but we still need to like sort out this classification system part. And last time when we left out, we had these points, objectives for the next session. So like what are the aspects of any drug that we must look into in order to classify them and frame the laws around it? Prioritize the impact to have a sensible overall rating for each substance. Deadline and outcome for this undertaking to be delivered by the end of the September. So we also need to discuss about like, how are we going to take up this brainstorming session? What are the objectives for it? And what are we delivering by the end of this 4 sessions? So I've talked a lot. I want to like quickly pause and see like if everybody's on board. So Shubham and Ruhi, I think you guys are new to this. I think Sona as well. Is everybody on the same page? Is it all making sense?
Yeah, I think I'm not sure if anybody joined from the last session. I'm not sure. I think you and me are the only one who joined from the last session. So
yeah,
you covered almost most of it, revised it very well. And I think the first step is to find out the layers, like finalize what are the layers that we should consider for the classification.
yeah. But before that, I wanna talk about like so right now who spoke? I think it was this Sandeep or Shubham.
Yeah, Sandeep.
So I wanted to just add 1 2 points.
Okay.
So the thing is, we are getting like too much into technicality.
Mhm.
So the point is, I don't know the agenda by the way, but I think it would be more sensible if we would get to the positive over negative effects or the negative over positive effects, like you were saying. So if that could be explained a little bit more better, then I think I would like it.
See, every drug, right? It has like positive and negative as well. So for example, if you take sugar, right? Sugar is associated with like some kind of like a psychologically, it gives you a certain reward effect. Psychologically, you feel like, oh, it feels so good to eat sugary products, right? So a sugar will be like, you'll say like emotionally, it gives you like a certain balance. Like, the balance of effect is like causes harmony in the system or promotes nurturing changes. You can say that emotionally sugar feels good, which is why people are addicted to sugar in a way where like if they're stressed out, they tend to like consume sugar as a sort of like coping mechanism. So it is a kind of a drug in that sense, but it also causes like detrimental effects depending on the frequency of exposure and the like a period of exposure. So if
But
you're
it is also like a source of the energy, major source of energy.
yeah, exactly. So if you're looking at that, right, like there is I think there was also I think we need to have like a thing for dosage as well. We need to have a column for dosage. So my intention was that, you will control the dosage aspect over here. So for example, right, anybody who's consuming like 25 grams of sugar per day, that will be like one category here. And then the frequency of exposure, like how many are you consuming it like daily, or is it like 4 times a month, or like something like that? So depending on that, you'll find different things here. So if it is like the frequency of exposure is low, but still you're having like a fatal effect, then that is a different pathway, and it'll have like different regulation applied to it.
No, but yeah, you are right, like somewhat. But the thing is, sugar and drugs are very different. Then because like see, even if though you consider like in the starting dosage and all you control, but there are rampant drugs like they have destroyed this like countries, kind of communities. For example, methamphetamine. Then
I know. See, our goal is to come up with an abstract model that is universally applicable. Whether you're looking at these like
that's too hard a goal. You don't think so?
Shubham, your voice quality is really, really bad. I can't
I think
understand.
it comes down to the fact that the first question we should need to ask is it harmful to your body?
Yeah.
And then there is a second question that comes down to dosage. At
See,
what dosage it starts, starts to be harmful for your body. So if something is harmful for your body and then you're using it regularly, and then the third aspect is what is the chances of getting addicted to it? If these three are like incrementally answered, and it can be classified as a drug, but then how potent it is can be decided at the how it affects the layers of
yeah. So
we decide on.
okay, I don't know if you guys know this, but like there are like different regulations based on different concentrations of the drug. I don't know if so. For example, right, let's say that you have like THC. I mean,
Yeah, sounds like yeah, plan.
one more thing, Shubham, your voice quality is extremely bad. I'm really sorry, but I can't really make out what you're saying. There's so much echo. Is there something that you can do to improve the voice quality? If you can do that, please, that'd be great. And also, I wanted to talk to Ruhi. Ruhi, you've been on the call. I think this is the first time you're joining in. I wanted to hear your thoughts. Is this making sense? Is there something that you
Yeah, I
had?
mean, it's making sense. Yeah, this is the first time I've joined. I've been wanting to join, but I couldn't. But today, I put aside some time to join this. Yeah,
Okay.
I think, I'm able to comprehend whatever you're telling.
Okay, perfect. Because like this is a very close group discussion, and I want to make sure everybody's engaged. And I think Shubham is rejoining. Anyway, so to answer your question, Sandeep, like Sandeep, you're talking about the dosage and stuff, right? What I was thinking is,
Yeah.
there are like depending on the concentration, there are different things. Like how like alcohol is sold, right? Alcohol is
Yes.
like there's 40% alcohol, and then
Yes.
something like that, right? So we can have that kind of a classification at the time of like even before we map the pathway itself, we can say so we can say 40% alcohol. And then we can also say something like 90% alcohol.
See, I think it makes little more complicated. I think the dosage should be another layer instead of a starting point, because a drug is a drug. How you take it, because the dosage level differs, because it starts from 2% and it goes up to like 80-90% in some cases, and how people are diluting it while consuming it also is another factor, right? So I don't think you should start the the starting point shouldn't be the dosage, because the dosage is, again, it varies from supply to the raw form, how it is available, and also how people are trying to consume it. Are they diluting it, or they are just taking it concentrated, also matters. So I think that layer can be overlapped with the amount of exposure, like the dosage, and then how long they are exposed at certain rate, right? Like are they consuming it for 10 years, 5 years, 1 year? So it is like multiplying factor. It is like you can just multiply how many years and what is the dosage. It gives you the rough idea of average, what is the dosage per day or per year or however, depending on the age factor. I think this is a factor that we need to consider.
Yeah. It makes sense. But also, I was thinking, like, you talked about like prerequisites, like specificity of impact, right? Here you have like, what people does it affect? Because some people who are genetically prone to certain things, it'll affect them a little more than others. So I had this column for this. I'm not really satisfied with it, to be honest. These things are like, one of the other things we have to look at is like, how are we measuring it with the purpose of enforcement of law, right? There are certain things that you can know from the reason why I put it over here. Over here is that this is easier to regulate. But if you measure also like how people are consuming it, then we need to have like more sophisticated mechanisms of regulation.
You can add it as a second starting point. Let's say alcohol, and then we can go into that instead
Concentrations.
of concentration, because of the size of how it is consumed, because of the character, because of the, how you say, on the ground reality. Let's say alcohol is let's say 80% of the alcohol sold is, let's say, 8% in volume, right? It has more we need to give it more weightage than rest of them. So yeah.
Something
But
like
it
this.
depends from drug to drug, because only alcohol has certain dosages, availability of dosages, but other, I'm not sure. Cigarettes, I have no idea how what is how
I think
cigarettes
cigarettes will have like a mild or a strong or whatever. I think I'm not really sure, but I think they'll have like these kinds of systems. I think they're more like flavored. I think there are different kinds of flavors. I don't really think they have like
I think there
concentration
are
based classification.
also certain levels of filtration systems, like I
I
think
mean,
different types of filters used.
yeah. I mean, some cigarettes are more refined and some cigarettes are not. Like the cheaper ones are less refined.
What does refinement mean?
I mean, in terms of tobacco refining. I
Okay,
don't
so
know.
they basically process the tobacco and then make the cigarettes
Yeah,
out of it.
something like that. Yeah, I'm not sure, but yeah, it determines the smoothness of the cigarette is what I think it is.
Yeah, so from that perspective, right, that's why I put it over here, because like then you can do it like brand by brand or like subcategory by subcategory or whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think, in my opinion, it will actually make it complicated, but you can just leave it and we'll see how it turns out, right?
Yeah, because over here, right, for example, let's say that 90% alcohol is like, we see that a lot of people are dying because of like overconsumption of this, something like that. Then we can place different regulations on this particular version of the drug. So like, for example, right, let's say that if you want to buy 90% alcohol, it costs like, maybe it costs a lot more than normal alcohol.
Yeah, then you may be right in the first instance, because you can directly categorize them in the beginning itself. Like if it has more weightage, then you can have multiple alcohols, like 3 or 4 categories of alcohol that would have a different grading or something.
Yeah, so we will do this so that like, this way what will happen is anybody is allowed to like, legally manufacture any drug as long as it does not violate certain classifications.
It also gives more, how you say, refined data about one particular, let's say if you have 10 varieties of alcohol, people know that this certain type of alcohol has more effect on you than it does. Right? That's actually a...
Yeah, and I think the variable of what people are buying should also be taken into consideration.
What do you mean what people are buying?
When it comes to alcohol, which is popular and what is selling?
See, that does not matter. Like, that is like brand related stuff. So I don't care. So, I mean, like, as a legal system, we should not care about the branding or anything. It's more about the, for example, right, like if you look at FSSAI's regulations, it'll have like certain framework of like how the manufacturer are supposed to market the product and all that. But beyond that, it doesn't go into saying that this brand is this or whatever. It only has like broad regulations depending on the ingredients and all that stuff. So similarly, we'll have certain classification systems, and brands can come and like target certain classifications based on what market they're trying to target.
Okay, yeah. So you make the blueprint and brands adhere to it.
Yeah. So yeah, so our goal is basically that as a this will be like a government's job to do. So for each drug, they'll just like come up with these kind of like pathways, and each classification will have certain criteria for which pathways classify constitute this particular class of drugs, and then based on that we'll classify these things, and then based on class 1, class 2, class 3, class 4, class 5, we will just start forming the regulations, like that this particular class of drug should only be allowed to be in a licensed context, where like specific industries or specific maybe like scientific industries or like medical industries or whatever, only they can use. So for example, right, if you look at ketamine is an anesthetic. They actually use ketamine in hospitals during surgeries and stuff. But some people are using ketamine as a recreational drug. So if you need a license to use ketamine, so instead of like placing a blanket ban on ketamine, you would just like allow only licensed operators to do that. I mean, this stuff is already existing. It's not like something we're building new. I actually want to quickly survey the US drug classification system, because they have like a proper system that's more transparent. They have like, I think 4 or 5 different schedules of drugs. So let's look at this. So drug substance consideration used to make drugs are classified into 5 distinct categories or schedules depending upon the drug's acceptable medical use and drugs abuse or dependency potential. See, that's exactly what they're doing. The US government has like made sure that their policy is like very clear and distinct depending on the dependency potential, abuse and dependency potential. So the abuse rate is a determining factor in the scheduling of drugs. For example, Schedule 1 drugs have a high potential for abuse and potential to create severe psychological and physical dependence. As the drug schedule changes, so does the abuse potential. So Schedule 5 drugs represent the least potential for abuse. A listing of drugs and their schedules are located in the Controlled Substances Act. Scheduling of CSA scheduling by alphabetical order. These lists describe the basic and parent chemical and do not necessarily describe the salts, isomers, and salts of isomers, esters, and esters. So they're going very, very deep into like various variants of the drugs as well. These lists are intended as general references that are not comprehensive listing of all controlled substances. So I mean, even with us, right, like what we're doing is like so exhaustive in our that it's not possible for like a small group of people like us to do this in a short period of time. So we're not going to go for like something that is like, we're not trying to do something fully enforceable at the get-go, but we're trying to get like at least like a skeletal framework done. Please note that a substance need not be listed as a controlled substance, be treated as Schedule 1 substance for criminal prosecution. So they have like,
So this is for entire drugs, or is this only for medical purposes drugs? Is it?
no,
Is
this is for so this is for not just this is for regulation as well as judicial systems. So when somebody's being prosecuted,
anything can be scheduled under
we'll look at
one of the
we'll look at the list of drugs as well.
Okay.
Please note that a substance need not be listed as controlled substance, be treated as a Schedule 1 substance for criminal prosecution. So they're also looking at from judicial perspective. And controlled substance analog is a substance which is intended for human consumption. It's a structured or pharmacologically substantial substance similar to represented by, it is not approved by medical use. Okay. Schedule 1 drug substance are classified high potential, some LSD, marijuana.
So what are we trying to do apart, different from what actually has in the FDA, sorry, DEA?
See, these guys, right, what they've done is they do this all the time. I mean, by the way, you're able to see my DEA thing, right now?
Yeah, I'm able to see your screen. Yeah.
Okay. Because I was sharing the Figma one. I'm not sure. Okay. As long as you're able to see this, yeah. So this is actually very arbitrary. If you see, look at the recent trends, right? History of marijuana regulation in the US. They've had like very large scale like variations in how they've applied the law. It's kind of like honestly, it's kind of arbitrary with how they've done it. Medical cannabis, history of marijuana regulation in the US. United States relationship dates back to the colonial era. American production of hemp. Hemp used to be like super popular, and then after the regulation of marijuana started, it kind of like impacted the industry. Became a popular ingredient in many medicinal products, which is sold openly in pharmacies. After the Mexican Revolution, 1910, Mexican immigrants flooded into the United States, bringing with them the recreational use of marijuana. The drug became associated with the immigrants, and fear and in turn prejudice about the newcomers became associated with marijuana. See, this is when the shift happened. There was a societal impact created by the new cultural perception of the drug. And anti-drug campaigners warned against the encroaching marijuana menace. So with the incoming immigrants having this marijuana use, right, they basically wanted to regulate the drug because of the detrimental impact on society. During the Great Depression, massive unemployment and increased public resentment and fear of Mexican immigrants escalated public and governmental concern about the potential problem of marijuana. By 1931, 29 states had outlawed marijuana. So they passed an
Again,
act.
it's a little unrelated, but I just wanted to add. See, even any drug, all these drugs we are talking about, there are a lot of other factors that no one would be able to expect or evaluate that anything could happen. Like they wouldn't know that what happened. It doesn't mean the marijuana or cocaine are only drugs available out there, but there are other factors that actually affect why why only certain geographical areas have certain different way of absorbing these kind of drugs. And because of this effect on one geographical location, it would impact because there are certain times in the history that made like this cocaine into the South America, and then that effect actually came into India as well, but it is not as much as how you say intense as it was, because there are like multiple factors that would come along with the this
No,
drugs.
absolutely. So one of the things I was thinking about, like for example, even with this context, let's say that this is actually a fairly reasonable justification for the Marijuana Tax Act, right? They were basically trying to tax the drug in order to discourage the use. So that's a very, very reasonable approach to doing it. But you need to have like a demonstration of the pathway in order for these laws to be passed, because you can't just like arbitrarily slap a law on something.
Yes.
So, for example, with the explanation that they gave, saying that like the immigrants came with the recreational use, so now this has to be regulated so that like more people don't use it in a recreational way or something like that. So here it will have something like they would say that like it affects the others at large, and even in low doses, like it psychologically creates a certain disharmony because like they stop functioning normally. Like that, they can basically like demonstrate these certain pathways, and based on that, you will just have like classification changed. And we can also like come up with like broad laws that say that like this particular pathway is very, very detrimental, therefore it has to belong to class 1 instead of like class 2 or something.
Yeah.
In 1950s, the federal laws which set mandatory sentences for drug were enacted. Lenient afterwards, 1960s. Yeah, see, these guys again, like they had to demonstrate the difference between like 1930 and 30 years. They had like a certain way of like going about this that was not in line with the observed reality. But also like there is a problem with what we are doing as well, because like if you're waiting for something to be so to get so bad that we have enough data to demonstrate it, then in that period of time people are getting affected.
Yeah,
Right.
it's taking measures even before it becomes a problem than being reactive to an issue.
Yeah. So I guess like you have to have like a certain phase, which is like what do you call it? Like a preliminary imposition of like laws, even before you find out the actual thing. Because like if you look at this chart, right, I've added like a row called unknown. Obviously, you don't know everything about a certain drug. If certain drug is like synthetically manufactured, you don't have like long-term trials on those drugs. So you don't know a lot of those things. So when you don't know a lot of those things about something, maybe we need to have a separate class for it.
Yeah.
Which will contain certain restrictions. And even if like one or two instances of a very dangerous pathway is detected, then we should like put it in a certain
Yeah, you can put it on
what do you call
hold
it?
for further data reason.
Yeah.
Hold it. Yeah.
This is a parents' movement against marijuana began and was instrumental in affecting public attitudes, which led to 1980s war on drugs. Mandatory sentences were reenacted by President Reagan. The 3 strikes you're out policy required life sentences for repeated drug offense. The war on drugs continued under President George Bush until 1989. Yet a major shift in public perception of marijuana was underway. In 1996, California passed Proposition 215, allowing for sale and medical use of marijuana for patients with AIDS, cancer, and serious diseases. Thus, the tension between federal laws criminalizing marijuana and state laws permitting medical use began with and continues today. Yeah, this is great. This gives us some context, but also I want to go into the list of drugs. Let's look at the scheduling part. So this kind of like a thing is what we are looking at. At the end of it, you have these kind of like very highly specific listings, which then have a scheduling, like a simplistic scheduling. This is like 1 to 5. That's it. And when I look at this, right, I feel like almost like what we are doing is like a little bit redundant, because like we could just follow this if this is all it is. But
Yeah, but this is I think the prerequisites for this listing is very limited, right?
what do you mean?
The chemistry and the potency. I think that is where the classification ends. Is it?
No, it see, this scheduling part is they also have this column called narcotic or not. I think some of these are like medical,
Okay.
right? So they have like certain classification. I don't know what the CSCN is, but the whole purpose of doing this is for regulatory and legal purposes,
Okay.
because they have like different laws apply to this. I'm gonna maybe go to Bing.
I mean to say they only consider the potency. I mean how potent it is and the chemistry, and they only consider only limited number of things before scheduling it as one of those
Yeah,
5.
honestly, there is so this is a controlled substance code. This code is assigned to drugs listed on the schedules created by the so it's kind of like similar to what we're doing. This code is what we're talking about when we are talking about these pathways, right? That's the code. And controlled substance. So the DEA arbitrarily assigns this. Each control substance is given a unique code based on the chemicals. Oh, it's a unique code, not like a classification. Substance is first classified into one of the 5 schedules based on the medical use, potential for abuse and safety.
I think
and
they have
defense.
both. They're also giving a code and also a classification.
Yeah, and the classification is like very, very simplistic, like 1 to 5, right? That's it.
Yeah.
And that's based on like very subjective factors in terms of like
Yes. That's what I think. That is what main difference between what they have done with that and what we are trying to do.
Yeah, but I feel like this is now I don't think it's redundant, because like there are other secondary effects of a drug use. So for
Yes.
example, when you have like cigarettes, right, it's not just you're looking at like dependency for like potential for dependency or something. You're also looking at like number of cigarette butts on the streets. You're also looking at secondhand smoke. All these other things, complex factors should come into play when you're regulating these drugs. So from that perspective, I think this
cultivation,
makes
supply chain,
exactly. Yeah, exactly.
greenhouse gas footprint and everything. Yeah.
Yeah, so cost to society is where those things would go, I think. And I think there's also like a peril of like us making this too specific that it becomes like very mind-boggling, right? I feel like this alone is like kind of mind-boggling in a sense. It's too overburdening in a certain sense. But from a classification point of view, we are not expecting consumers to come and look at this. This is for the regulatory authorities and academicians and to all those other people to come and look at this.
Yes, also it's important to keep the track of data and statistics of certain trends, which could also have multiple uses and also multiple results that multiple entities can use: governments, manufacturers, even consumers, of course.
Yeah.
Supply chain, and the data goes into multiple facets. It can be used in multiple ways, and it can be used to have the data is like the gold, gold of 21st century.
Yeah. I mean, it just gives more clarity to the different classes of the users. When I say user, I'm talking not just about the recreational users, but also medical or like legal users and all that stuff. So I think this is a more comprehensive way of classification. So theoretically speaking, we'll just list out the drug classification process so that like we're listing out what goes on before something is classified. And also, I just want to note that the objective for today's session and tomorrow, the next week's session as well as the last session. I think the last session we should just like package all of this stuff into like a cleaned up version where we'll have like an easy way of saying like if somebody were to look at this file by themselves, they will still have a certain proper understanding. So we need to work on presentation on the next session. So I'm just gonna like list out the objectives here. Before I forget. So first session, second session, third session. So for the fourth session, we'll focus on presentation. So for the third session, we'll look at like a legal framework around classification. So for the second session, for this session, we'll try to wrap up on the classification protocol. First session was like mostly like initial discovery and problem framing. Okay, is this making sense? Is this like seem fair?
Yeah.
Okay, so for now this session, we already have reached like 50 minutes. So let's try to like wrap up the classification part. So the first protocol is the pathways of the drug classification need to be. So first level is preliminary classification in terms of dosage. Preliminary classification of retail products in terms of dosage. Price, because one of the factors is like not just price but dosage, barrier for acquisition. So if you look at the marijuana analogy, right, they first came up with the taxation law. So this is actually one of the deterrents of like anything, like if you heavily tax a certain activity, now it becomes a deterrent. So you can't have like like large scale industries doing something that is highly taxed, so that like it'll kind of like minimize the use of that something.
I
So
mean, alcohol is also heavily taxed, if I'm not wrong.
it
There's
is,
still
but I'm saying that this classification system has to tie into that. Like, so let's say that alcohol is like instead of it being expensive, right? Let's say that I think if you get like a bottle of beer, it's like maybe 500 rupees, let's say. Instead of 500 rupees, if it is like 10,000 rupees for per bottle, now that already is a deterrent, right? But let's say that if instead of 500 rupees, it is like 2 rupees per bottle. Now that's a different way of looking at things. Now people are going to consume it in large quantities. So preliminary classification of retail products in terms of concentration, dosage. I'm not sure if the cost should be like a column or is it something. Concentration, dosage, cost of acquisition. Okay, so that's the first step. You're classifying the retail products. It's not like a constituent chemical components. You're talking about the retail products, and because at the end of the process, right? You're looking at the things that people can use, but also people started. If you don't have like regulation at the level of like the constituent chemicals in the product, then they can just like simply procure the chemicals and then like use it to produce the product at home. So that is also a thing. But I don't know to what extent we can do that. I'm still not clear on like how we can do this properly. But okay, let's say that we're just classifying retail products for now. And then once they do that, the pathways of drug classification that are applicable for that particular product need to be mapped. And for a particular pathway to be mapped, we must have demonstrated with data. We must demonstrate the validity of the pathway on that drug.
So before this, have we finalized the prerequisites? I mean, like, what are the layers? Have we finalized it or to be finalized?
What do you mean prerequisites? What are the layers? These layers you're talking about.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we'll go over this, but I just want to quickly note down the steps that we'll take.
Okay.
And for a particular pathway to be mapped, we must demonstrate the validity of the pathway on that drug. In case a certain pathway is not established, but there is sufficient information to suspect its validity in that pathway, and that pathway seems to be seems to belong to a higher priority class, we can preemptively put a restriction on that drug product. And each drug product is given a series of codes which identify a pathway. For for a drug or product to be assigned a certain class for a drug to be assigned a certain class, it must contain a list of pathways that belong to that path. List of pathways or combination of pathways that belong to that path. So this is where the real like challenge is. For example, you have like 5 classes, let's say, and if you are putting this on a certain product, what are the things that the product has to qualify? Because there are different pathways, right? For example, if you are classifying certain drug as like severely restricted, let's say methamphetamines, but also if a certain drug is like very, very easily accessible and it is not as like immediately detrimental as a methamphetamine, because in order to get addicted to methamphetamines, you don't need to spend a lot of time getting exposed to the drug. But let's say that a large number of people are exposed to a certain drug and it is causing a lot of cost to the society, then you can still put it in class 1 because for different reasons. So there are like different pathways for a drug to be ending up in class 1. And by specifying the codes of the different pathways that particular drug qualifies for, you're giving like the rationale for why it is in class 1.
So every pathway has a different code, right? If the pathway changes, the code changes.
Yeah. And yeah, I'm not really sure like if we should have like just the class or something else needs to be added to the class to sort of like distinguish, right? But so let's say this is class 3. This is just an example thing in order to see like what the end product looks like. So at the end, right, when the user, when a public is looking at it, they'll only see this thing. If they need to understand what this one means, they have to go and explore the manual for how we did the classification.
Should we have another column, the deciding factors that it took class 3, or is it the pathway is enough for
I think the pathway itself is a justification.
Yeah.
You're saying that,
yes.
But the other thing is that, so pathway will be like, for example, right, let's say that if you want to demonstrate the why this qualified for this pathway, that is a separate question.
Yeah.
So you need to have like a report on each of the pathway being demonstrated on a certain drug. I think we also, at the end of this thing, right, like by the end of this call, I think we should also like do like a sample classifications for certain drugs, and also like come up with certain pathways that are very problematic. I think instead of like having like this kind of a thing, we can also have number-based things like 8, 3, 4, 3, 3, something similar to what the code was, because the code is to identify a different pathway. It doesn't mean anything by itself, but by looking up the code, you can see what is the pathway.
You can assign them like column on rows, and then first digit represents one, second digit represents something like that. Like if you have like 10 layers, the code probably will be like 10 numbers, 10 digit.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, I was actually planning something like that. So as it could be something like if it's scope of impact, right? Maybe you have like a number for this one. Yeah, like I was thinking like S for S1,
3. This one, the one you already
mapped,
pathway, right? Like 3, 3, 3, 3, 3, and then it goes 5, 5, 5, something like that.
Yeah, but yeah. But then for that, like we have to maintain the order of it. We would, if you do something like that,
you cannot add anything else, but then the number changes. That's as simple as it is, I guess.
No, it would then you would have to have like maintain the version numbers for each one.
Yeah.
So different maps will have different version numbers, and for each version number, you're specifying that. Maybe we can have the version number itself as one of the first things. So we can have like V1, and then we can have like a 7-digit number or something.
Yeah.
Or instead of that, we can just have the version number itself is like a certain number, but then if it goes into double digits, then it's kind of like or
you
we
can
have
put
like
the number before the V, like 01V or something like that.
You know what? I just okay. I got an idea. What we can do is we can have like 01 dot, and then dot is a separator that will just like say,
Yeah.
and then you can have like codes for these things itself. So the 01 is just a version number for now.
Yeah, you can put a ABC on the other line, on the row, and every layer has its own alphabet that will not change.
Yeah, and if we manage to like scrape this away from the map version, so for example, let's say that this is a column A, and this is like, so 3, right? A3. So it'll be A3, and then B2, C3, something like this. But let's say that we decide to replace this column, A column, then it'll mean that instead of like now, future versions will be like, we'll say something like 02, B2, C3. So we'll just scrape off that. But is that really effective? Because then you'll only have like 26 columns, possible columns. That means like, 26 columns is plenty, but in terms of permanent, right? Like everything is like assigned a permanent this thing. So how do you? Maybe each column could itself have like a code. So anyway, for versioning, we are giving the number at the first, right? So instead of like having A, B, C, you can just have 1. So let's just map this one out first. By the way, this one, I want to remove this because we wanted to have dosage separately. So this part, this physical, emotional, psychological thing, right? That one, I don't think we need to specify anything separately. We just say like A1. I think we'll just say like P, and then 1, 4. Or should
Isn't it the pathway will change for every no, if you change emotional, the pathway would change, right?
Yeah, it'll be different pathway. Yeah.
Then I'm not sure how the numbering works.
No, see, I'll tell you. So at the end of it, right, you'll have something like this. So 01 dot P is for physical. At the same time, if you have like 02 dot P.
Got it, yeah.
Something like this. So you would simply be able to recognize the severity of a drug simply by seeing whether that particular drug qualifies for this.
Yeah, with the number itself, you know the pathways. You can make out the pathway, the numbers.
Exactly. Yeah. So for cigarettes, it's like P 142434, something like this. 14.24.34.4456. It's going to be a long number. It's like almost like an IP address multiplied by 2. Like it's like multiple things.
Again, but we are limited to only up to 9. Is it how it works, or?
No. See, here you'll basically list out all the different pathways that this particular product is resulting in. So it's not like just like we have one pathway for the physical. like, so for example, right, for the physical itself, the scope of impact, if you're looking at the scope of impact for the society, then this will go into this direction.
I mean to say the layers can only be up to 9, because if it goes to 10, then the digit numbering will get confused, because
yeah, that's why I was saying.
digits.
That's why I was saying, like, we need to have like maybe like an extra separator. For example, you can have like 1-4 or 2-4, something like that. So it kind of complicates everything. I mean, we need to like also like, if you want people to actually use something like this, we need to have like simplicity, prioritize simplicity. But then again, this is nothing about this is simple. So
Yeah, it's not very complicated to understand, in my opinion. It's just a bunch of numbers that you can make out. It's not a big deal. Even you can even compile it to an Excel and make a system out of it. It's
yeah. So from the perspective of like, what are the different physical effects? Like if you're looking at physical effects on an individual person, then from here itself, right, you can have like various pathways, like saying that, okay, if the individual is like using it in low dosage, then it'll go into this one. So it'll be like, P1422, and then it'll be a different pathway. So from a classification perspective, here you have to list out all of the different pathways that classify under this. That is what makes this whole thing cumbersome, because like now you have even for one drug you have like infinite number of pathways, potentially infinite number of pathways. Like there are so many combinations, right? If you look at the permutation combinations of these number of options, it is like crazy high. Which is what makes it like, you can only do this if you're doing it in a computerized, like automated fashion. So, but still it's workable. It's not that it's not workable. It's just that it makes things more sophisticated. But I think from a mechanism perspective, I think this works, right? The only thing is that now when you look at the columns, let's look at this first. So the way I did it was like, for different dimensions, you have like a scope of impact, and you have like frequency of exposure. So depending on, let's say for 40% alcohol, if your frequency of exposure is like on a daily basis.
Scope of impact in what is the scope?
For what?
Is it what is the impact? What is it measuring actually? What does it mean?
Scope of impact means it's like, is it affecting just one part of your body? Is it affecting your entire body? Or is it like affecting not just you but people around you? Or is it affecting people
is it
at
a
large?
first column is a description of that?
Yeah.
One.
This first column is basically the description of like the range of the impact of the drug.
Can you zoom in a little bit?
It's hard to read.
Yeah, I'm on the computer, but still I couldn't make it.
Yeah. So the first column is like scope of impact, and then like you have these standard options. So affects a part of the system. When I say the system, you're talking about the individual. Actually, let's change that. And then affects only the individual, affects others in vicinity, affects others at large. Okay. And then frequency of exposure is like low, medium, moderate, and high.
What is in the first row in the yellow box?
That's just like a name of it, like describing those things. So like I'm saying, the scope of impact means the number of individuals who are impacted by the effects. Frequency of exposure is like how frequently during that duration should the individual have exposure to the influence of the object. So how long does the individual have to sustain the exposure of the object, period of exposure? And then balance of effects is like, is the effect likely to be positive, negative, or neutral? So we're also measuring those things. So for example, right, let's say that a certain drug has negative emotional, let's say that it makes you like really, or not emotional, but like, let's say psychologically it gives you like a certain high, let's say, but physically it's very detrimental. So psychologically it is giving you like a positive euphoria, but physically it is like over time it is degrading your body. So in that case, what will happen is like if physically it is causing a lot of harm to the system, but psychologically it is giving you short-term positive effects. So the balance of effects is talking about whether it's positive or negative. And then you have severity of it. So let's say the positive effects like very highly severe, but the negative effects like it takes a long time to get there. Then we need to look at it differently. So the combination of pathways also like makes a difference.
Yes. Yes.
And so here, for example, the permanence of effects also is a factor. So let's say the balance of effects is like it's really positive, and the severity is like very high. Positive effects are very high, and here the fatal doesn't make sense. So severity of the positive effects like extreme, and effects are like long term, and scope of dependence is like 0. That means that that's a very good drug.
Yeah.
It's gonna give you like a positive impact, and it's not really.
Are you getting any noise from my side?
I think in the background there was some kind of like noise
Yeah.
earlier, but not now. I think now it's fine.
Okay.
And permanence of effects, and then scope of dependence, low, high. Because you know what, this is actually the only thing that DAS are looking at: scope of abuse and dependence. But we are looking at so many other things. So probability of impact, because certain drugs, right, like they may or may not have impact.
Yeah.
So some potential has a moderate chance of certain. And in specificity of impact, so here I've added the saying how specific of the effects in the drug, how specific of the effects in terms of the individual's makeup. So is it affects no one, affects only those with specific pre-existing conditions, affects most people, affects nearly all except some, and then everyone.
Yeah.
And cost to society, this is really important: low, moderate, high, extreme. So you know, if you look at this, right, these classifications are also like subjective, because like I don't think we can circumvent the subjectivity of this whole process. You have to like acknowledge that this is a subjective process, which is why these are like loosely modeled. I mean, I don't think that it would make sense. For example, right, if you think about frequency of exposure, here we simply have like a very broad classification of low, moderate, and high. But imagine,
yeah, I mean, it's like we can take the statistics, and it's all about. There is always a background data. We'd have to assume that.
no, like
yeah.
Instead of having
Please
low, moderate, high, if you have something like 5 times a day or like 5 times a month, depending on the context of the drug, 5 times a day could be high, extremely high.
Yeah.
So here you're just talking on a subjective basis. Cost to society, none, low, moderate, high, extreme. And then reversibility of effects. It's also important, where we're talking about like, is it possible, for example, let's say that somebody is getting addicted to cigarettes. Is it possible to reverse that? Now, again, depending on the period of exposure and all these things will matter. So if somebody is consuming, affects only the individual, and it's high, the frequency of exposure is high, period of exposure is like persistence over decades, persist. What? I think this stuff is like, I'm not sure. I think there was a mistake here. So persistent period of exposure, few days. I think we can also classify this like this: low, moderate, high, and then you can say extreme in some sense. Yeah. So here as well, if let's say that you're consuming cigarettes and it's like the period of exposure is like low, then the reversibility will be high.
Yeah.
But because here we chose like the frequency and period of exposure is high, now the reversibility is low.
Yeah.
So that's the reason for this. I think this is a solid starting point. We've covered a lot of like important factors. I'm kind of like satisfied with the column listing part. Now we need to talk about this. So this makes sense, right? Ruhi, what do you think? Is this like you feel like we missed anything, or is it seeming?
No, I'm able to follow it.
No, do you feel like there's something else we need to look at besides this, or is it something that seems comprehensive?
I mean, I don't have anything right now, but if I come across anything, I'll just let you know.
Sure. And also, like, do you guys, either of you guys, do you have any background in medical or like chemical or whatever stuff?
No,
I
I'm
have
a
a
mechanical
background in
engineer.
Ruhi, what about you?
I have a background in corporate law.
Okay, that's at least maybe then we can we can have some inputs on this stuff. But for this one, I think, yeah, I think this is looking solid. We'll just I think at the outset, at least, I'm not really sure about this part, final classification part. Like, I just went about this like because we had the
Yeah.
schedules of drugs because of the US system.
Yeah, even I think the pathways is more makes sense, and classification we may have to assume a lot of things before classifying,
Yeah,
or on what basis, what is, let's say, what out of these layers, like 10 layers, what are the layers which dictate most towards classifying a drug into one of these 5?
yeah. So we can come up with some example things which will make things easier. So I'm gonna like duplicate this table.
I think if even if we make the pathway subjective, sorry, objective, I think the classification becomes very subjective.
Yeah, I mean, no, classification is objective. The pathways is more subjective, I'd say.
Okay.
Because see, we are following the process of like low, moderate. This is a very subjective classification, but we are saying that when a certain drug passes for a certain pathway, then we are automatically considering it as.
Okay.
So that is why this is an objective process. So I'm gonna like maybe make this. So each class has a list of pathways.
Is it possible we can give it a score, and if it crosses this certain threshold, then it will be divided into one of those classifications?
That's
Is
a
it
very good point. Yeah.
subjective enough, or?
Yeah, I think that's a very good point. We can have like because like it's not like only the presence of one thing is like meant to be.
Yeah, let's say cost to society is very high and rest of the things
Mm.
are zero. Let's presume. So it's,
Mm.
is it? I think if that could classify into, like, let's say class 2, maybe class 3. So
Yeah. My brain hurts, man. So much thinking. I've been. It's like I've been in back to back. I've been in like three or four back to back brainstorming sessions like this throughout the day without a
okay.
break. But anyway,
Today all day, huh?
yeah. This is my third or fourth call talking about very highly technical stuff.
Okay.
So I think that's a good point that when because like I didn't recognize the subjectivity of this process because I thought like as long as any of the pathways that we are listing under class 1 is present for a drug, then we'll put it. But then we also we need to remember that there are combinations of pathways.
Yeah.
So I think what we can do is we will identify certain pathways that by themselves that are so problematic that if as long as a drug does even that much, then you need to put it in class 1. For example, let's say that you have like what is it called? I think one of these like extremely explosive stuff, nitroglycerin, right? Let me just look it up for once.
Not sure what it is, but
No, not nitroglycerin. Then something else used for prevent angina. Okay. Explosive nitro. Maybe it also has the same name. Explosive natural thermal decomposition yield to molecular. I mean, you guys haven't heard about this like explosive chemistry of nitrogen, because the component contains nitrogen.
No, I never heard of it.
Me neither.
Ruhi, your voice was breaking up. Yeah, nitroglycerin is an explosive, powerful and unstable
I said
explosive.
okay. I haven't heard of it either.
Yeah, so it's a powerful explosive. Like if you carry a bottle of nitroglycerin, you happen to drop it, it'll explode, like like everything in the room. Like this will basically collapse the room. It's like that. So that's what the dynamite is made of. So let's say nitroglycerin. Let's say we're analyzing nitroglycerin through this thing.
So are you taking an example, or is it a drug as well?
No, I'm just saying that we're identifying one of those like fatal pathways.
Okay.
Because like if nitroglycerin is available for anybody to purchase or anything, then
Yeah.
it can result in like large scale impact.
Yeah.
So here we are talking about the physical thing. I don't know if we should try to multiply this or something. So from this perspective, the physical damages affects the entire society, right? So we can say something like affects others at large. And how frequency of exposure is like, like low. You don't need a high exposure here. It's just like once. And period of exposure is also low. And then valency of effects is like negative. And severity is like fatal. And permanence is like, obviously, you can't restitch an exploded face. So permanent is permanent. Scope of dependence is like, zero. Nobody's getting dependent on nitroglycerin. And probability of impact is certain. And specificity of impact is everyone. Cost to society is like, I don't know if we can say it's extreme, because like you have to look at the data on like how many people are affected by nitroglycerin. Cost to society is high, because like if you manage to explode public infrastructure, right, it's like very extreme almost. So we can put it as extreme. And reversibility is like none, basically. Okay, so this pathway, if any drug qualifies for this pathway, it automatically goes into class 1. So what we'll do is we'll map this particular pathway as like one of these things. So here we're talking about P. It's like 0, 1 hyphen 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And then 0, 2 is like 2. And then 0, 3 is 2 dot 0, 4 is 1, 2, 3, 4, 0, 5 is 6. I think we need to just number these things. It'll be a lot easier, I think. So I had this numbering down here, but here also we can number it, I think. So Ruhi, did you join because like you were interested in law, or what was it? Because this is the first time I'm seeing you.
Yeah, this is my first time. Reason I joined because I looked at the concept. I think from past two sessions I wanted to join. The last two sessions I think I wanted to join, and the subject for those things, so I wanted to join.
Nice, nice, nice. I'm glad you joined. All right. So now we have these things. So it becomes easier to do this. I think we can move this one over here. Move this here.
Oh man, how big is your screen?
I have a 32-inch monitor. So okay, that's much better. Okay, so 05-6 and then 06-6. Oh, it's like we're going from 0 to 5, right? We need to change these things. So 5, 1, 1. Zero 1, 03, 1, 04. It's like 3, 05, 5, 06, 5 again. And then 07, 1, 08. 08, 5, 09, 5, 10, 5, 11, 1. Wow, that's a long code. We can look at like ways to optimize this, but this is I think it's a good starting point. So if any drug qualifies for this pathway, it automatically gets classified as class 1. And then if let's say that we had another combination that had to be like, coexist with another combination, we'll have something like this. So each of these would be like rules. By itself, if a certain drug qualifies for this combination, it'll automatically get classified as 1. Hope that made sense. But it is kind of like subjective about like, the effects of these things: physical, emotional, psychological, spiritual. Spiritual is like everybody will have debates on that. But yeah, so this is the idea. So from a general framework perspective, then you have these pathways. It's easy to identify, and then the class will have like will tell you like which pathway classifies for which class. And you can have like multiple combinations also, like, it's not just like 2 combinations. It's like a combination of 4 or 5 pathways also could be like part of this. But at the end of it, right, like when I think about it, we are doing it in a very seemingly objective way, but at the end of it, even this whole like system, right, like classifying this combination of pathway into this class, it's a very subjective process.
The fact that it is possible to change it at a whim, it gives you certain framework to understand, even for the subjectivity of it, to have a objective application for it.
Yeah, I guess that is the benefit, that you're able to like speak about it objectively instead of like everything being objective. Because first of all, I don't think that there is merit in eliminating the subjectivity from anything, because like as a human being, we are composite of the subjective and the objective reality. So a lot of our quality of life metrics are subjective, right? If you talk about like happiness is a very subjective thing. I don't know how happy you are. You have to report it, and I can't measure it objectively. So there is like life is all about the combination of objective and subjective aspects.
Even subjectivity has its own data point. Like, let's say you have experienced happiness up to like 10 out of 10. Someday you might experience more than 10. It's until you get that data point, you don't know what are the extremities of that.
No, but I'm saying your 10 could be somebody else's too. That is a subjective nature of it.
Yeah, that's again that's what their range is.
Yeah, but it's impossible to know, right? So if you're framing certain things, for example, let's say that for you pain is subjective. Like let's say the mosquito bite is like obviously like not very fatally painful, but maybe somebody else with if their sensitivity is so high, then it could be. So if you're classifying something based on the pain thresholds, then it may not be applicable for the person whose sensitivity is like very wildly different from the normal person.
Yeah, but at least there is certain certain ways that, let's say, most Indians are capable of taking a mosquito bite, but not Europeans. Like, there is certain objectivity in there.
I don't know if that is true. It's more about like individual.
Okay, fine. Maybe that's what my experience is.
No, the point I'm trying to make is that like if for example, let's say that mosquito bite is meant to be extremely painful. Let's say for me, I'm making the claim that for me, a mosquito bite is like extremely painful, and I could choose to act out saying that every time a mosquito bites me, I could just like be writhing in pain, like just rolling on the floor in pain, crying, and you could just believe that. There is no way for you to measure whether I'm telling you the truth or not. You have to rely on self-reported measures. So that is what makes it subjective, is what I'm saying. And because I come from a psychological research background, in psychology, like a lot of the data is like self-reported data, and that is why psychology is sometimes like classified as a pseudoscience. It kind of like it kind of like riles up a lot of the psychology professors and stuff, but it is because like there is an inherent limitation in the domain of study you're pursuing. For because like that's what I'm saying, like everything about life is a composite of the subjective and the objective, and just because you cannot measure it does not make it unworthwhile of study or something, because that has been the historical background of science, where like they choose anything subjective as a black box that has to be ignored. They you have to pursue only the objective, and I think that is like a flawed perspective. I feel like you are basically saying no to half of reality, because half of reality is subjective. But yeah, I think this is starting to make sense. I'm not obviously we are not in any position to like do mapping of all drugs or anything, but we are basically coming up with like a sort of like a framework. So this is like an example kind of a thing. So we can say even this, right? We can have like various things like white sugar, brown sugar, strong coffee. cigarette, mild, whatever, you know. Like natural marijuana. So like this, and then like you'll have like various pathways that it qualifies for in the classification. I think we've got the classification system down.
Yeah.
So and you know, this is like a one-time thing. When you do this, it's a one-time database thing, and as soon as you start classifying certain drugs into those classifications, it'll just do a check to see whether class 1 pathways are also matching with one of the pathways of these things, and if it is, then it's automatically assigned the highest class.
Are we gonna have another column for score?
What?
Will you have another column for adding up the final score?
There is no
it-
score. The classification, the class itself is the score.
Okay.
And
fine.
based on the class, we will have like various regulations in place.
Okay.
I still don't know if we should add another column, because like that is something I think we'll get more clarity on once we have this discussion. So that is our next discussion, where we'll look at the legal framework around the classification. But I just want to like list out the algorithm for like how we'll do this. So preliminary classification of retail products in terms of concentration, dosage, and cost of acquisition, and pathways of drug classification that are applicable for that particular product need to be mapped. And for a particular pathway, we must demonstrate the validity of the pathway of the drug. In case a certain pathway is not established, but is sufficient information is validity in that pathway, and the pathway is each product is given a series of codes which identify the pathway. That's it. Yeah, I think we're good, guys. Wow. I'm proud of us. I'm proud of the progress we've made. So I think at the, you know, like next week we'll just like go over this stuff, and then like for the final one we'll figure out like how to actually present this. If we like, you know, if somebody comes and look at this, it should be immediately apparent as to what this is and how we need to do this. And I think this kind of discussion, right? Like I just want to finally touch upon this, like this kind of like citizen-based initiative where we are talking about these you know, like these kinds of, give me 1 second. Let me just like close the sharing part. Okay. So this kind of like a conversation initiated by citizens where we are participating in the solutioning of something is really something that I want to see more of in the country. So I think I've spoke about this last time. I think Sandeep, you were here, but I just want to like reiterate that there is a lot of value in this kind of discussion where people are coming together to solve problems. That's one of the reasons why I was really keen on doing this brainstorming part. And moving on, I think, I mean, this month we are talking about this, but moving on, there are certain other topics that I'm really interested in conducting these kinds of conversations around, which is like, for example, how do you structure the legal system? How do you structure the law enforcement system? How do you structure the judicial system? How do you structure the education system? And various other things that are like broken in our country that we need to like come up with a framework around. And even if like nobody takes mind of this, right? Just the fact that, we are going through it, it'll give us, the participants of this exercise, some clarity on like what this, what are the challenges that this thing constitutes. I know that this is like not for everybody, because like I see, like just 2 of us, 3 of us in this call. It's not for the, I guess, like the general population, but I think that there are a lot of people who would actually find this interesting. So I want to make this a big deal, like where we are all like, coming together to solve problems, using our brain power to crowdsource our intelligence and arrive at like a constructive outcome. So that is the final, like the motive behind this whole exercise. I want to like, hear from you guys, like, what do you think about this? Like, how do you feel about it?
Yeah, as you mentioned, you have been doing this brainstorming session for the full day, and it hurts your brain, right? It's not something that, yes, I have seen multiple individuals personally and also online. I'm inspired by a lot of a lot of YouTubers and content creators. They do have a holistic view. Like you need to have that kind of uh, absorption of data logic, and then also look at a solution, not all also look at the problem and not also get offended or get emotional, and then redirect towards something that what actually affects as a whole, not just as an individual or just like a little group, as a as a whole, as a system, as a country, as a humanity, as a just what, not only up to the we cannot only look at just as a national level. It also has a lot of effect on international and as a species as a whole.
Exactly. And also I can do this by myself for sure, but I would not have any mechanism to validate my thoughts. But
yeah, I mean, you can even involve a little bit of experts as well.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, right now I don't have the means to go and invite a legal expert or like a neuroscientist or a chemical scientist or something to come in. But eventually there is a scope for that. Right? I mean, the fact that all 3 of us are doing this, that itself is an achievement for me, because like I'm just a normal dude like out here with a computer at home. That's it. I don't have any other like resource at my disposal. And if we can do this, like, eventually if this gains momentum, I would assume that, we can have like a bunch of people coming in who are a lot more than just 3 people. Because
you have to keep at it, and then
it has to gain momentum.
I mean, is there anything that you're doing to, for these videos to get momentum? Like, are you putting it on YouTube or anything like that?
Yeah, this is being recorded right now so that like it goes on YouTube. We've been doing this for a little bit of time. But I'm not really doing any kind of marketing as such. I'm just like, because like we cannot handle a large volume also, because like right now we're doing it on Zoom. Imagine like if 40 people are in this call, it'd be really chaotic. So there are limitations to this, but also like, imagine if instead of like 40 people being in one call, if you had like 10 people in 5 different calls, that's a large number of people we're engaging as a platform. But at the same time, it's not super chaotic. And maybe even for a single problem statement, right? If you have like, let's say 5 different teams that are brainstorming on the same topic, at the end, you'll have like 5 different outcomes and you can compare. So we can do this in a lot of ways. I don't know if you guys know this, but I'm working on an application for the debate club, where brainstorming will be one of the different kinds of formats of discussions. And we can have like limits on the room capacity for each kind of like a topic. So if you have like a topic and maybe 500 people are interested, I'm assuming that, maybe like 5 years down the line, the debate club would be like something of a big deal. And let's say that 500 people are interested in joining a brainstorming session. They'll just be broken down into 100 different groups, and they can do that, and they can all present at the end, and the best solution wins. That would actually be a great incentive for somebody to put in all their brain power and come up with something. So there is a lot of scope.
I think the problem statement has to be addressed by the academics and the experts in the field.
No, I think together. No, for sure.
Momentum, I think, it will catch their eye as well.
Yeah, for sure. I think we just have to keep doing this on a weekly basis and get to a point where we are producing these kind of results that are interesting for people to look at. For example, right, like I've seen some artists who are like really, really awesome. And for like 4 or 5 years, they'll be like, nobody will be looking at their videos or artistic content. then suddenly they'll have like one video that goes viral, and then suddenly
Yeah.
everybody's exploring all their past videos. I think that's how it goes, So we
Yes.
can't like expect any kind of instant thing. We have to like establish our credibility through persistence, and then it'll eventually like happen something.
Yes.
But for now, even this, right? I'm not looking at that as a reward. This whole experience itself was a reward. I don't even know you guys. I don't know where you're from, and we're coming together to have a very intellectual conversation, which is like, honestly, it's phenomenal.
Yeah.
So I'm really glad you guys joined. Thank you for the discussion. Hope you guys join soon, like moving forward as well, as we have more interesting topics. Bring in your friends. If you have somebody else that just bring in them, and let's have an organic growth arc.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. Sure.
All right, guys. Thank you so much. We'll
Yeah.
catch up next week. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Good night.
Bye.